We've done the three previous videos. I showed you how to do a feather tail, and then I showed you the hair stacking techniques, doing a Dahlberg diver, and then we did a video on trimming and finishing the fly. So what I want to do now is we're going to take the same tail. This is exactly the same tail, well, it's not the exact same tail, it's another tail, but same color scheme. You can see it's got the, the nice V splayed in it. I've got the, those bird fur feathers with some flash in there. And I've got a nice collar, nice hackle collar on this fly. So we're going to put this fly in the vise. And what I'm going to do in this video is we're going to spin a deer hair head for a popper as opposed to a diver. So let's go ahead and let's get started with that. Okay, so here's my tail. And one of the first things I'm going to do when I start trimming this thing, I don't want to trim this collar out. And so I'm going to do the same thing to this fly that I did to the first fly. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to sweep all these feathers back, and then I'm going to take and wrap a thread band right here. Let me trim this tag off, and then I'll just come in here and I'll just put a whip finish on this. Now remember, this is a temporary thread band. I'm going to cut it off at the end of the fly, but what it does is it gets my hackle collar, my tailing materials, and all of that stuff out of the way of the work that I'm going to do for the deer hair head. Okay, so now let's come in here, and I guess I got a couple little stray fibers there we'll take out. Just like I did on the other fly, I'm going to start by just wetting the hook shank a little bit on this pattern. This is just Zap-A-Gap, or this happens to be Wapsi Fly Tire Z-Ment, same stuff. It's a super glue is what it is. And then I'm using my gel spun thread. This happens to be Semperfi 100 denier, what they call their nano silk. I guess they say it's a little different than gel spun, but gel spun 100 denier or 30 denier, like UTC GSP 100 or 130 is also a real good thread. The 130 is a little harder to find. You might have to ask a fly shop to order it, but if they have UTC threads, normally they'll be able to order it for you. So you can see I got those first few wraps in there, and you can see I'm solid now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap a thread base all the way forward. And then we'll come back down. And as I said before, the reason for this thread base is to, as I put the deer hair on, I'll use the Fly-Rite fly tie, the fly tires, this Fly-Rite fly tight tying cement. Put a little drop in there. I think the threads may help wick that back a little bit, but also then when I come in with my compression tool and I push back on the hair, that thread base underneath will slide and compact that hair a little more. So I've got my thread base wrapped. So let's start with my first bunch here, and I'm going to do kind of the same color scheme, pretty similar color scheme. So I'm going to take my bunch of hair. I'm going to comb out the under fur. Now what I'm going to do, I don't need the tips. I'm not using my stacker on this hair fly, on the hair here, because I'm not going to be doing a hair collar. I'm just going to have the body with the hackle collar right behind it. So what I do is I put the hair in my hand like this, and then I come in here, I turn it towards me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim out both the tips and butts, and that's what it looks like when it comes out. That just helps to make the hair head look a little neater. And now, again, this move right here, this is the move you've got to you've got to master in order to be able to do these stacked deer hair heads. And what it is, I'm going to wrap 3 times around this hair. Okay. Now let's back up a little bit. I've seen guys that put the butts behind on their side of the hook shank. I've done it both ways. If you do it here, you got to rotate the hair around a little farther, and then the butts come out towards you. If I put it in this way, I only have to go a quarter turn. I've always done it on this side and never really had any problems with it. But you might see some videos where they'll drop the butts in on the near side rather than the far side like I do. Now remember, the trick to this move is you got your thread tension is just right there where the hair is just beginning to flare, but not really any farther. Now you just push it around on the bottom, put your thumb on it, and then flare it in place right there. And if you do it correctly, you can see there's no hair on the top of the hook shank. So now I'll come in, I'll just put a little dropper of my Fly-Tite cement there. Now I got sort of some decisions to make. I do want to incorporate a little red. If you recall, on the diving collar, on the diver, I had the whole collar was red. I'm going to make the red a little bit more subtle on this one. I've done these two where I've done the bottom color red and then built white on top, and that looks good too. I kind of feel like maybe the red, I don't know, maybe it looks like gills to a fish. I know the red fish come up and eat these, but you want a little bit of red in there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit, and I'm going to add just this little layer of color in here. Again, I'm just snipping top and bottom. I'm going to lay this red right here, come in, and I'm going to hold it right in place and flare it right on top. Then I'm going to come in, I'm going to add just a small amount of white, not a lot. And I don't want to start overwhelming the top of this head with a lot of hair. So don't get really huge bundles. Actually, this is more than big enough right here. Now I'll add a little white, and I'll flare it in place. Now I'll come and just get a little tiny bit of black. I mean, really just a small little snip, just to add that little color pop of black around my gray spot. So we'll lay that in there. And then I'll separate that out. Now I'll come and I'll get some of this dun colored belly hair. And again, I'm not using a lot. You don't want to use too much here because you already got several stacks in there, several pieces of hair. So there's already quite a bit of hair on the top of this hook shank. And then I'll flare it and put it right in there. Now I'm going to push that back, and I'll come forward, and we'll put a 1/2 inch in here. This hair is not going to compress very much because it's up against the tail. But we'll just come in for the sake of demonstrating it, kind of push on it a little bit. See, it really didn't move much at all. But now I'm going to take my thread out a little ways. And I'm going to continue forward doing the hair. Now I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this red, I think this is all the red I'll put in this one. So I think from here on out, I'll do white on the bottom. I'll come on top, do white, a little bit of black, and a little bit of gray on top of that. So the techniques are exactly what I've just shown you. They're the same techniques that were used on the diver. So let's go ahead. I'll just jump in and we'll fast forward and go through this fairly quickly, okay? Okay, so I finished spinning the hair on this. So let me take my tweezers here. This doesn't look too bad. Kind of comb through it here. I'm just kind of combing through to see. I got a little red that kind of bled down in there a little bit. I kind of rotate that out of it just a little bit. But I kind of look at my gray bars and make sure they're all across the top kind of even. And I can move them back and forth. I can move these around a little bit right now, but you got to do it before you trim it. So I think we're looking pretty good there. I think if you kind of look at the, let me pull it out. You kind of look at the top of the head. You can kind of begin to see the pattern there a little bit. The bottom looks pretty dense, pretty good. I'm not seeing any folded over hair yet. Sometimes you don't see it right away. You see it once you start trimming it. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's look at this next step in doing this. So let me set this aside for a moment because I want to explain what I'm going to do next. So there you have it. Yeah, you can see the legs come back. Well, these are a little shorter than sometimes I do it, but they're back about 2/3 of the way back on the tails. You can see. I've got the eyes in, and these are glued in. Now, I wouldn't fish it right away, but they're glued in. They'll be pretty tough once the glue kind of dries on them. Got the eyes in, and then the last thing I did was I finished out the thread wraps with some Hallie Sanson's Hard as Nails just to finish out this bass bug. All that stuff I did in detail on the diver, and there's nothing real different about this. There really isn't, anything a lot different about this fly than the diver. Other than the diver, I put the 3 clumps of hair, the one in the center, then 2 at each 45 for the diving collar. But other than that, it was pretty similar. Then, of course, it was trimmed out a little differently. But you can see the hair under the bug. I have fished this style of bass bug for a lot of years, and I can tell you that all I do is I treat the top with some floatant, and then I let the bottom go. And this fly literally lands upright every time. I mean, it's so rare that I'll have one of these land upside down. It just almost never happens. And what I do with it is I cast it, let it land, tighten up to it, maybe give it one tiny little movement, and then wait and see what happens with it. And the other thing too is because I haven't treated the head, I can make it, if I really strip it hard, I can make it spray some water. But what I do more is softer strips, and it kind of bulges the water more so than spraying water. And I think that bulging movement, it's a more subtle movement, and I just think it's in a lot of ways it's more attractive. Like I've said before, I rarely catch fish. I mean, I typically start with my very slowest retrieve, and if that's not doing anything, I'll speed my retrieves up a little bit. But it's pretty rare that I'll be right in the middle of a fast retrieve and a fish will come and hit it and hammer it. Most of the time, even if I'm kind of popping it and stripping it, it's when I stop it and give it a moment that it will. Oh, you can hear Daisy in the background here. It'll. So when I'm stripping it, it's when it stops a lot of times when the fish hit it, or I cast it, give it one quick little just movement, and the fly lands lightly enough on the water that the fish come towards it to see what's going on. And this little bit of movement with these materials kind of moving around in the water, it looks kind of alive, and they'll just come up and suck it in. So anyway, there it is. Feather tails, and a popper body. So this will be the part 4 of the video, or of the DVD, or not DVD, excuse me, the video series on doing these. So again, hit subscribe, and thank you for watching.